Hey guys, I haven't done one of these in a while, but since it's been in the news a lot lately, I thought I would do one today on tariffs. It's been in the news quite a bit, and if you look at the market at all, just about every day, the reason the market is up or down, listed on CNBC's website, is the trade war with China, and we hear that President Trump is putting tariffs on certain goods. So I wanted to talk to you about the direct and indirect result of tariffs. So the easiest is the direct. One of the products that is under the tariff, which is a tax, in other words, 25%, is Bluetooth speakers. So let's say that there is a Chinese firm that makes Bluetooth speakers, and your Best Buys, your Walmarts, probably your local cell phone store wants to carry those in store and sell them for a profit. Now that they are being tariffed, there is a 25% tax. So let's go with just Best Buy. If they ordered $100 worth of these, for simple numbers, then they would spend $125 now, with $25 of that going to the U.S. federal government. Okay, so the tariff is a tax. Now Trump has said that China is paying for the tariffs. And I'll get to what he's talking about here in a few minutes, but just bluntly stating it like that makes you think that they're paying this extra 25%, and they are absolutely not. So if Best Buy places its order, and then the item that they order from China is under the tariff rule, then the 25% extra that they pay will end up going to the U.S. federal government. Now, last year in 2018, total tariff revenue for the federal government, for us as a whole, was $22 billion. And while that sounds like a lot, you got to remember that for the full year, we took in from all revenue sources 1.2 trillion. Okay, so that makes 22 billion like couch cushion change. Okay, so that's a direct tariff. There's also a thing called an indirect tariff, and that's the one that I think nobody really thinks about or considers. And those are the ones that do the most damage. So I'm going to use a homegrown example of this from back in Kentucky. Toyota has a large manufacturing plant in Georgetown, Kentucky. It's been there since 1988. And they make the Camry, the Avalon, and the Lexus ES, which is the Lexus version of the Camry, okay? They produce over 500,000 cars a year. And last year, the Camry sold 328 some odd thousand. I looked that up earlier. So another of the items on the trade list is steel and aluminum. So now, if Japan, who owns Toyota, it's a Japanese firm, if Japan has been buying aluminum and steel from China and shipping it here, if the good is imported to the U.S., then Japan is looking at losing that money from one of their companies, Toyota. So now Toyota, in effect, would be paying 25% more than the normal list price for steel and aluminum, and that money would go to America. Okay, so that's putting Japan in the middle of something that they have nothing to do with. Toyota and many multinational companies create subsidiary companies that are based in that country. So the plant in Kentucky is Toyota Manufacturing USA. Okay, so it's not just Toyota Inc. So they do their own buying and selling, but it's ultimately revenue that goes back to the parent company of Toyota, which is a Japanese firm. Now, what will generally happen in this regard is they'll simply pay the tax or the tariff to the U.S. government, and then whatever that costs them more for the car, they'll just raise the car by that amount, which means you will pay for it. So Toyota will say, okay, that's fine. We'll keep importing into the U.S. The steel and aluminum to make the Camry. And then what we'll do is we will raise the price of the car by $300 or $500 or $800, whatever that number is, to make up for it. Companies are profit motivated, so they're not charitable. They're not in the business of giving away money. So they're not just going to absorb the $500 or the $800 more that they're paying. what they could do and what the goal is that Trump forces Japan to buy that steel and aluminum somewhere else and cutting off that sale from China. However, if you are known for having a very reliable car brand in the Camry, it's not an easy thing to do to just switch who your supplier is. If they have been getting consistently quality steel and aluminum from a Chinese manufacturer, they're going to be very hesitant to switch that and then put a product out there that does not live up to the long built reputation that the Camry has. Okay. So US consumers generally pay the tax. There is a group called the Bureau of Economic Research, and they aren't political at all. I'm sorry, they're not political at all. They're called nonpartisan. They just tend to look at the economy and publish reports and say, hey, here's what's going on with this thing. As of right now, without the upcoming potentially new tariffs, they have estimated that the cost of the tariffs instituted already will cost each of us individually in America on average $500 a year. If the new tariffs that the president is threatening go into effect, that number will raise to $2,200 a year. So most of you have heard the name Adam Smith. He's kind of known as like the godfather of economics. And Smith's point was always that countries should do what they're best at and only what they're best at, and then trade with other countries for the things that they're not good at, okay? And China is kind of where we were about 70, 80 years ago, in that they are a big manufacturing economy, okay? The iPhones are built over there. For example, Apple does not build the iPhone in America. They are a big time manufacturing economy, and we are now a big time services economy, okay? So things like software and things of that nature, we're no longer building stuff like we used to. So what Trump is trying to do is trying to level set what you call a trade deficit, okay? The trade deficit with China, meaning how much more do we buy from them than they buy from us, is about $320 billion. But it is the world's biggest economy. Second would be India, or India's first. I can't remember. They're huge. These are massive, massive emerging economies as well, meaning they are bringing millions of people every year because of the growth of their economy out of poverty, okay? When those people come out of poverty, they turn around and they buy things that are made in other countries like America. So they buy American goods. So most economists absolutely hate trade wars. It's, hey, look, if I'm better at this and you're better at that, then why don't we just trade? But if one country is monstrously bigger than another, you will run trade deficits. Many countries in Europe run a trade deficit to us, simply because we are sometimes up to 10 times their size. So it's easier for them to just trade with us to get the product they need. Think about how much more room and land we have to grow corn than a country like Germany or Spain or England, which these are relatively small land masses, okay? They're like Texas is bigger than most of them. So it would make sense for us to trade with them and then say, we're not going to worry about raising corn over here because it's just really not profitable for us. We'll get that from America. But the goal, ultimately, of a tariff is to force a company to buy the product from a different country than the one that gets the tariff placed on it. And in this day and age, that doesn't really happen anymore. The companies will continue to buy the goods from China. They will spend 25% more to do so. That 25% goes to the federal government. And then those companies will just pass that cost along to you and I via higher prices. And that's pretty much it. That's what a tariff is. They are not used very often anymore. But generally speaking, this president has to win or appear to be winning. And he feels like a $320 billion trade deficit is not good. However, over the last 4 or 5 years, both us and China have been growing very well. For America to grow at 3 or 4% right now is astronomical. We're not going to hit 4, but anything between 2 and 3 for a country our size is amazing. China's growth rate is almost 10% a year. So I think both countries have already been benefiting. The biggest thing that's in here that American companies want fixed, and it's not even being talked about, is China has almost no intellectual property laws whatsoever. There are literally stores in China that are fake Apple stores that look just like Apple stores in America and are selling fake iPhones that look just like an Apple iPhone. But China has almost no intellectual property laws whatsoever. So one of the biggest things that we want protected is our intellectual property. You know, Microsoft wants to get its revenue from selling real Microsoft Office over there, not some cheap Chinese manufacturer going in, stealing the code, printing it, running it out there as Microsoft, and then selling it and Microsoft getting nothing. So the one thing that we need to be doing is figuring out how to get China to enact some stricter intellectual property laws, because a lot of the companies in America are complaining that their goods are being sold over there fake, and people are buying them fake, and then they're not getting the money for it. So that's the biggest thing we got to work out. But I don't think a trade war is going to stop that. Right now, Bureau of Economic Research has it $500. If you see the next round of tariffs kick in, count on $2,200 out of each of our pockets. Tariffs have been around a long time, and economists are not fans. They don't tend to go well. It tends to sink the stock prices of the companies in America that need these goods. And if you look at, let's say, Toyota in Georgetown, if it becomes too expensive for them to continue to operate and we aren't buying the Camrys at the new higher prices, then what's left for them to do but to cut cost by simply laying people off? They're not making as many in the car anymore. So there's a lot more negatives to tariffs than there are positives. And China is such a world superpower now that they've got a lot more leverage than they would have had 10 or 15 years ago. So this is an area to tread very carefully. We've got a temperamental guy in the office. I'm afraid that he'll let this get out of hand, when I think, in this case, China already has the upper hand. So if you have any thoughts or questions, hit me up. But otherwise, that's tariffs, guys, in a nutshell. Not hard to explain, but I don't think a lot of people dive into it, nor do they look at what the real ramifications are. So again, this costs China nothing. They still export the same stuff unless a company decides to find the product somewhere else, which oftentimes just doesn't happen. So if y'all have any questions, hit me up. Have a wonderful day, and don't forget the playoffs start tonight. Go Warriors.